Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
On the second day of the official campaign trail, all three leading presidential contenders, Lee Jae-myung of the DP, Kim Moon-soo of the PPP, and Lee Jun-suk of the Reform Party, were in the conservative-leaning southeastern part of the country. U.S. stock markets were quick to respond to the news of a major rollback on tariffs between Washington and Beijing, with all three major indices sharply rising. A symbol of Korea's peace mission over 2 centuries ago has made it to its destination in Japan in time for the celebration of Korea Day at the Osaka Expo. This year's arrival is all the more symbolic, as the two neighbors celebrate 60 years of their official friendship. It's May 13th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We're now counting down precisely 3 weeks to the June 3rd presidential election. The Liberal camp's candidate Lee Jae-myung traveled to the conservative-leaning southeastern part of the country, saying what matters is people's everyday lives rather than ideologies. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
National unity was a key topic that Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung shared during his second day of campaigning for the presidency. Lee kicked off Tuesday in Gumi, the birthplace of former conservative President Park Chung-hee, known both for his autocratic rule and having led the country's rapid economic development. Lee's visit to Gumi was part of his campaign through regions known as traditional conservative strongholds, including Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, Daegu, and Ulsan. The DP said Lee's visit to this key industrial area shows how strong his intention is to bring the country together and promote balanced regional growth. Lee laid out his vision to make Gumi a key engine driving South Korea's economy. He also acknowledged Park's contributions to the country's industrialization and promised to be a capable leader. Lee said the country's future matters more than political size or ideology.
What matters most is people's everyday lives, not left or right, red or blue, or where you're from. It doesn't matter if a policy came from Park Chung-hee or Kim Dae-jun. If it works, we use it. If not, we don't. Ideology isn't as important as the lives of our people and the future of this country.
In the afternoon, Lee visited Pohang, the nation's traditional powerhouse for steel, seeking voter support. During his speech, Lee Jae-myung urged people to come together to overcome the hardships that followed the declaration of martial law. He also emphasized national unity regardless of political affiliation. Lee wrapped up his Tuesday campaign in Ulsan, where he focused on strategies for industrial growth and supply chain restructuring. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News, Pohang.
The conservative camp's candidate Kim Moon-soo was also in the southeast, continuing his rally there for the second day. This as he apparently walks on a tightrope as former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his martial law continue to cast a shadow over the campaign. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon explains.
People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo spent a second straight day campaigning in the Gyeongsang-do region Tuesday, pledging to revive an area that's seen a clear population decline. He wrapped up the day's events at a local market in Busan, the nation's second-largest city, promising more jobs and better infrastructure.
If I become the president, I will build an express train system here and make the surrounding cities all within 30 minutes of each other. Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongsang-namdo province will become one giant and the best global city that can be on a par with the capital.
While cities like Busan here are traditionally viewed as a conservative stronghold, Kim enters the race at a disadvantage on impeachment of its former president and the turmoil between Kim and the leadership over Kim's candidacy. That's likely why he started his first extended stay here in this region to solidify his supporter base. Before Busan, he was also in the neighboring city of Ulsan, a major industrial city as well. For this city, he pledged a multicultural complex.
The city has requested a large-scale cultural complex, estimated cost around 500 billion won. If I'm elected president, I'll make sure it doesn't take long. I'll allocate a special budget of that amount to Ulsan as soon as I take office.
But Kim's visit to the southeast doesn't end there. On Wednesday, he's expected to campaign in smaller cities like Jinju and Sacheon, continuing efforts to shore up support. At the same time, how to deal with issues regarding former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his martial law declaration continues to cast a shadow over the campaign. In a televised interview Monday, Kim offered his first public apology for the incident and its aftermath to the nation. The apology also gave attention to calls from some to expel Yoon from the party. Kim responded to this on Tuesday morning, saying whether the president leaves the party or not is up to him. It's not right for the party to decide that for him. With some party loyalists still backing Yoon, Kim must walk a fine line, keeping the base intact while reaching out to undecided voters, many of whom remain critical of the martial law attempt. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Busan.
Staying on the campaign trail, foreign party candidate Lee Jae-myung was at the conservative stronghold of Daegu. Starting with a rally in the city's commercial center, Lee then sat down for lunch with students at a university cafeteria before heading for talks with medical professionals. The 40-year-old candidate declared himself the future of Daegu, emphasizing his youth and intentions to interact directly with all those involved. He also found fault with the Conservative Party presidential hopeful for failing to oust the impeached former president from the party. Similarly, he accused the Liberal Party candidate of abusing legislative power to attack the former administration while inciting political division. In other news, a massive fire broke out this morning at a logistics warehouse in Icheon City, Gyeonggi-do Province, and was brought under control by 4 p.m. Authorities say the blaze, which started on the 3rd floor, did not spread to lower levels. No injuries or fatalities have been reported, and all 178 people inside the building were evacuated. The 80,000 square meter warehouse stored various items, including paper products and lithium-ion batteries, which made firefighting efforts more challenging. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. U.S. President Donald Trump has hailed recent tariff talks with China, claiming that Beijing will fully open its market to American businesses. In the meantime, stock markets were the first to respond to a major rollback on tariffs. Lee Soo-jin has the details.
Thank you very much.
President Donald Trump on Monday hailed the temporary de-escalation of trade tensions with China as a total reset that will open China's market to American companies.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. and they've agreed to open China, fully open China. And I think it's going to be fantastic for China. I think it's going to be fantastic for us.
He also told reporters in the Oval Office that he may speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week. The U.S. and China reached a trade agreement that slashes U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods to 30% from 145% and lowers Chinese tariffs on U.S. imports to 10% from 125%, a decision that cuts tariffs from both nations by 115 percentage points. But sector-specific tariffs on automobiles, aluminum, and steel are still in place, and China will be subject to tariffs on pharmaceuticals that Trump previously said would arrive shortly. The agreement followed 2 days of discussions held in Switzerland between senior-level officials from both nations.
Neither side wants a decoupling. We do want trade. We want more balanced trade, and I think that both sides are committed to achieving that.
The two sides held in-depth exchanges on trade and economic issues of their respective concern. The atmosphere of the meeting was candid, in-depth, and constructive.
The deal, which will be in place by May 14, will be effective for 90 days and sets up a framework for further talks between the two countries. U.S. stocks responded positively to the news, with the Dow Jones surging to close at 2.81%. The S&P 500 closed nearly 3.3% up, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq closed 4.35% compared to the previous trading day. This comes as investors reacted favorably to the unexpected progress in talks between the U.S. and China, sparking a rally in major tech stocks such as Nvidia, Amazon, and Meta. Companies like Best Buy and Dell Technologies, which rely heavily on Chinese manufacturing, also saw strong gains. 이수진, Arirang News.
Ceasefire talks are set to begin between Russia and Ukraine later this week in Turkey. And the American leader may join the much-anticipated meeting. Park Go-nu has more.
As Russia and Ukraine gear up for their upcoming ceasefire negotiations in Istanbul later this week, U.S. President Donald Trump said he might travel to Turkey as well. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Monday, Trump raised the prospects of taking part in the talks in the hope of putting an end to the killing on the battlefields.
I was thinking about flying over. I don't know where I'm going to be on Thursday. I've got so many meetings. But I was thinking about actually flying over there. There's a possibility of it, I guess, if I think things can happen. But we got to get it done. We got to save 5,000 lives a week. 5,000 lives is really more than that. It's worse than that.
President Trump will be visiting Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar this week. Amid prospects of Trump taking part in the talks in Istanbul, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Monday that he wanted the U.S. president to join the peace talks. In a post on X, Zelensky said that everyone in Ukraine wants President Trump to take part in the peace talks in Turkey, calling it a good idea. However, the Kremlin remains silent about whether Russian President Vladimir Putin will take part in the talks this week. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, the last surviving American hostage was set free by Hamas just 1 day ahead of Trump's diplomatic tour to the region. This comes as Israel continues ramping up its military actions in Gaza. Choi Ji-hee has the latest.
On Monday local time, Eden Alexander, a 21-year-old Israeli-American from New Jersey, was released by Hamas. He had been captured during the October 7, 2023 attacks while serving in the Israeli military. The announcement of the decision was made on Sunday night by Hamas after holding days of talks with the United States. Israel had been bypassed during the negotiations. Alexander's release is the first since the resumed military operations by Israel, ending a previous ceasefire. The handover occurred in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, where Alexander was transferred to the Red Cross before being handed over. Arriving at an Israeli military base, he reunited with his family. President Donald Trump praised the decision, which comes a day before he visits the Middle East on Tuesday, with scheduled stops in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, as a step toward peace. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the occasion a very emotional moment and credited the release to Israel's military pressure and political influence from the U.S. He reaffirmed his commitment to securing the release of the remaining hostages, with plans to continue intensifying military actions in Gaza. Following Alexander's release, still in captivity in Gaza are 58 other hostages, and at least 20 of them are believed to be alive. Alexander was the last U.S. citizen held by Hamas thought to be still alive. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
At the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV engaged with the media for the first time as pontiff, addressing freedom of the press, as well as the role of the media to promote peace. Park Hyo-bin covers his comments.
Amid thunderous applause, Pope Leo XIV, the 267th pontiff, made his entrance.
Buongiorno. Good morning.
He started his first press conference at the Vatican on Monday with a light-hearted joke.
They say when they clap at the beginning, it doesn't matter much. If you're still awake at the end and you still want to applaud, thank you very much.
In his address to more than 1,000 journalists from around the world, the Pope emphasized the way the media communicates is key to promoting peace.
Dobbiamo dire no alla guerra delle parole, delle immagini. Dobbiamo respingere il paradigma della guerra.
He warned against using language that fuels hatred and emphasized the need to amplify the voices of those who cannot speak for themselves.
Disarmiamo le parole e contribuiremo a disarmare la terra.
He also called for the release of imprisoned journalists, underscoring the importance of press freedom. Pope Leo addressed the rise of artificial intelligence, urging its responsible and ethical use for the benefit of all humanity.
Penso in particolare all'intelligenza artificiale col suo potenziale immenso, che richiede però responsabilità e discernimento per orientare gli strumenti al bene di tutti, così che possano produrre benefici per l'umanità.
After speaking for about 10 minutes, Pope Leo stepped down from the podium to personally greet and engage with journalists. Following his call for an end to the wars in Ukraine and Gaza last Sunday, Pope Leo has made peace a central theme of the start of his papacy. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
Staying in Europe, Korean conductor Chung Myung-whun will take the podium of the renowned Italian opera house La Scala next year to become its first Asian musical director in history. Lee Jae-myung covers this upcoming event.
On Monday, Italy's world-renowned opera house, Teatro alla Scala, announced on its official website the appointment of a new music director. According to reports, 72-year-old Korean conductor Chung Myung-whun was unanimously chosen for the role by the opera house's board of directors in a meeting on the same day. Inaugurated in 1778, this is the first time in La Scala's 247-year history that an Asian person will hold the position. Chung will also be just the second non-Italian to take up the role.
This isn't just about being appointed as a music director of an opera house. First and foremost, it marks a personal milestone for the 72-year-old Chung Myung-whun, the peak of his career. Secondly, as the first Asian music director of La Scala, it elevates the global status of Asian, and especially Korean, classical music. It's something that can inspire and give hope to the next generation of Korean conductors.
Chung's musical journey began as a pianist, but he stepped onto the conductor's podium in 1978 when he was named associate conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. In the 1980s, he entered the European scene, serving as music director of Germany's Saarbrücken Radio Symphony Orchestra and later of the Paris Opera. Chung's ties to La Scala run deep. Since 1989, Chung has led 9 opera productions across 84 performances and conducted 141 concerts at La Scala, which is more than any other conductor who did not hold the title of music director. According to AP News, the Opera House praised his close and productive relationship with its orchestra, choir, and philharmonic, stating that no other non-director has contributed more to enhancing La Scala's global reputation.
Chung will succeed Ricardo Xi, with his official term beginning late next year and running through early 2030. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
Over in Japan, people there welcomed a special guest, as a symbol of Korea's peace mission has arrived in Osaka for the first time in over 260 years. And this year, it's all the more special. Our correspondent Song Yoo-jin explains why.
It's a landmark voyage brought back to life more than 2 centuries later. The reconstructed Joseon Tongsinsa ship, once used to carry Korean envoys to Japan from the 17th to 19th centuries, has now reached its final destination, Osaka. While the recreated vessel also sailed to Japan in recent years, this is the first time it has anchored in Osaka since the 11th Tongsinsa mission from 1763 to 64. This year's arrival is all the more symbolic as it coincides with the 60th anniversary of normalized diplomatic ties between South Korea and Japan.
Korea and Japan can't move away from each other. We're very close geographically and historically. This ship isn't just a symbolic restoration. Just as it opened a sailing route, I hope it also opens a path for both nations to grow together in the future.
The Tongsinsa mission has been a symbol of mutual respect and cultural exchange beyond borders. Recreating that history today will play an important role in helping Korea and Japan learn from their friendly past and build a future-focused relationship.
This journey wouldn't have been possible without this team, who designed, built, and sailed the vessel modeled after the original Tongsinsa blueprints.
We began planning this reconstruction back in 2015, and now, nearly a decade later, we've reached Osaka. We're deeply grateful to everyone who helped make it happen. Our institute will continue restoring and sailing traditional Korean vessels to preserve this legacy on the water.
But the celebration didn't end at the port. So as Tuesday, May 13th, marked the National Day of Korea here at the Expo 2025 Osaka Kansai, the reenacted Joseon Tongsinsa prepares something really special here. The envoy procession marched through the expo grounds just as the original envoys did when they set foot in Japan. Drawing large crowds, the parade echoed across the venue, spotlighting the centuries-old message of peace-building and cultural diplomacy. As for the Tongsinsa ship, now docked in Osaka, it will offer an onboard exhibition on the Goodwill mission before its journey back home. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Osaka.
Many places had a real taste of early summer heat today. Temperatures in the capital will go up even higher tomorrow, hovering way above the season norms, feeling more like early June. And how about the sunshine? It was hard to walk around without sun protective items. Intense sunlight continues nationwide, so we hope you manage to stay cool and protect yourself from this strong sunshine. The morning starts off similar to slightly higher temperatures tomorrow at 15 degrees Celsius here in the capital, Busan, Daegu at 14 degrees. While highs in the eastern regions were nearing 30 degrees today, and it will be a couple of degrees lower than that on Wednesday, but most parts will still see highs in the mid to upper 20s tomorrow. Heat relief is coming with rain in the forecast on Thursday in central regions, the southern coast and Jeju, but the amount will not be that much this time. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
제21대 대통령 재외선거.
세계 어느 곳에 있어도
내가 국가대표라는 마음으로
누구보다 땀 흘리죠. 지금이 국가대표임을
보여줄 기회.
대한민국 국민의 권리.
대한민국 국민의 의무.
반드시
투표합니다. 국가를 위한 대통령 투표. 제21대 대통령 재외선거. 중앙선거관리위원회.
저희가 매일매일 자동차를 타고 일상생활에서도 쉽게 사용을 하는데 그런 자동차에서 타이어는 계속해서 버려지고 있거든요. 전 세계적으로 10억 개 이상 버려지고 있는데 특히 소각 처리될 경우에는 대기오염 물질들이 여러 가지가 나오게 되고 매립됐을 때는 지하수나 토양오염 물질들이 많이 방출되게 됩니다. 저희는 그런 타이어들을 어떻게 잘 처리할지 좀 고민을 했었습니다. 타이어가 가지고 있는 접지력이나 내마모성이 좀 우수하다고 생각을 했고요. 저희는 타이어 하나로 신발을 3.5켤레 정도를 만들 수가 있어요. 그렇게 됐을 때 저희의 신발 한 켤레는 타이어에서 발생되는 탄소를 8.9kg 정도 저감할 수 있는 그런 효과가 있습니다. 이 일을 시작하기 전에는 타이어가 그렇게 많이 버려지는지도 몰랐고 그리고 버려진 타이어들이 환경 파괴적으로 처분되는 것도 사실은 잘은 몰랐어요. 점점 더 적체가 되고 있거든요, 타이어들이. 시간이 지나면 지날수록 더 큰 문제가 될 것 같다는 생각에 지금 일을 하고 있습니다. 타이어마다 모양이나 패턴이 굉장히 많이 다양한데 내가 가지고 있는 신발이 다른 신발들과 모양이 다를 수 있다는 점, 그런 점도 제 재미 요소로 좀 다가가고 있습니다. 저희도 그런 계기를 보다 많은 분들께 하나 더 제공해 주고자 매일매일 신는 신발을 만들겠다고 한 것도 있어요. 조금 더 주변을 살펴보면은 나 스스로도 조금 더 환경 보호에 참여할 수 있는 일이나 물건들이 더 있지 않을까, 그렇게 찾아보시면 어떨까 싶습니다. 나는 다시 달릴 수 있게 만드는 그리너입니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-kyeon. The world's two largest economies have just hit pause on their most volatile trade standoff in years. After 2 days of high-level negotiations in Geneva, the U.S. and China have agreed to a sweeping temporary rollback of punitive tariffs. Under the deal, the U.S. will lower its tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, while China will cut its tariffs on American goods from 125% to just 10%. The joint statement outlines a 90-day window aimed at easing tensions and creating space for further talks. Framed as a gesture of mutual respect and continued communication, the deal signals that both sides recognize that prolonged tensions could further disrupt supply chains and pressure key allies. For a deeper analysis of the latest agreement, we invite Hana Kim, Associate Professor at Sejong University GSIS. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me again.
And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Jeff Moon, president of China Moon Industries, LLC, and former assistant U.S. Trade Representative for China. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's start a discussion first with Professor Kim to the joint statement right away. Both sides will drastically reduce tariffs for 90 days from 145 to 30 for the U.S. and for 125 to 10 for China. How should we interpret this move diplomatically? Do you think this reflects genuine de-escalation, or do you think it's simply a tactical pause?
It might be too early to say that this can reflect a genuine de-escalation of any sort. From what we've seen from the joint statement, we can see that both the United States and China have, in the very least, assessed this agreement positively. In that way, it could signal some type of diplomatic development, especially since both countries have shown a willingness to de-escalate tensions. And the Treasury Secretary also called these discussions, very productive. But at the same time, the trade imbalance between the two countries is a deeply rooted issue and a very long-standing one. It dates back at least to the Clinton administration, so it's not something that can be resolved through a single round of negotiations. Plus, this is just a 90-day tariff reduction agreement, meaning that more can happen afterwards. And already, citizens from both sides have been dealt rough blows. So, especially considering what we've seen for the past few months, this agreement should be interpreted more as a temporary patch agreed upon by both sides. President Trump has seen a decline in approval ratings due to domestic economic issues, in part because of the tariffs, but other reasons as well. And President Xi Jinping has also been dealing with continued conflict with the U.S. that hasn't, made him viewed very favorably. So this is a significant burden on him as well. So it seems as though both sides have to agree on a temporary pause at the moment. And it seems as though this is just like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It just seems very temporary and just a pause for the moment.
Right. So it's still really early to determine at this point. Now, moving back to the joint statement, so a 115-point rollback on both sides. It's really unprecedented in terms of scale. Mr. Moon, from your perspective as a former trade negotiator, how significant is this massive tariff rollback on both sides? And do you think it's a structural breakthrough or, again, a temporary economic relief measure?
I agree with Professor Kim's observations and would add that this policy change, I think, reflects Trump's recognition of the limited effectiveness of tariffs as a trade tool. President Trump hopes that tariffs can solve all of his foreign policy problems, including trade abuses, currency manipulation, and even criminal problems like fentanyl. So with regard to China, he increased tariffs to the point that almost all bilateral trade stopped, a result that really served no one's purposes. And now he has pulled back to prevent the imminent disaster of massive unemployment, bankruptcies, inflation, and disruption in the global economy. These tariff reductions mean that Trump has now exhausted his tariff leverage against China, and he needs to turn to the heart of America's problem with China, which is Chinese industrial policies that disadvantage foreigners.
Right. But Mr. Moon, we are aware that this is just a 3-month deal, a 90-day cooling off window. what does this impact? How does this impact on supply chains, inflationary pressures, or investor confidence, especially given how disruptive tariff levels have become?
3 months is a relatively short amount of time, but the cooling off window, I think, will benefit global markets greatly. We've seen that stock markets are up, reflecting relief as well as optimism. On the ground, there's greater certainty that business can go forward. Canceled orders are likely to be reordered. Laid off workers in China will go back to work. Trans-Pacific shipping will resume. Key products will remain available to American consumers. And there will be stockpiling again before the expiration of the 90-day deadline. From a macro perspective, I think this development reduces the threat of inflation, but there are still major questions that are out there. It's not clear that all companies can absorb the tariffs at the 30% level that have been announced. A lot of folks in Washington think that trade gets prohibitive at about 60%. Citibank has published an estimate where they say that they think the global economy can absorb 20 to 25%. So this ability to absorb varies from sector to sector, company to company. I'm really worried about businesses and firms that are small businesses and those that have very low margins. They're especially vulnerable in this environment.
Right, it would be definitely deal a big blow to small businesses, of course. Now, going back to the statement again, this has emphasized mutual respect and also sustained communication. Professor Kim, in diplomatic language, this sometimes signals friction. What's your reading of the language used by both sides, and how much trust do you think really exists between the U.S. and China at this stage?
I think it's too early to say that trust has increased between the two governments. And these terms, mutual respect and sustained communication, they can be interpreted in many different ways depending on who's using them and which governments are involved. But in many ways, phrases like mutual respect and sustained communication does signal the need for ongoing dialogue. It also can signal areas of disagreement. So even before this agreement started, China repeatedly emphasized that while dialogue with the U.S. remains open, it requires the U.S. to show respect towards China. Here we can see the term mutual respect being used. So, in fact, Beijing has made similar statements during the Biden administration, reflecting a consistent component of China's foreign policy principles, specifically one of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. So, from China's perspective, mutual respect is essential for overcoming the current tensions in U.S.-China relations, but it also signals that this mutual respect is still insufficient. And on top of that, given that President Trump has made numerous tactical and inconsistent remarks in the past, China is naturally concerned that even if an agreement is reached, the U.S. might later shift its stance. So this concern is likely reflected when they're emphasizing the phrase sustained communication, right? The importance here is sustenance, but a lot of the times we have not really seen that. So from China's perspective, it can also signal that there are these points of conflict that need to be addressed. And this language may reflect attempts to de-escalate the current situation right now, but it can also indicate that significant efforts are going to be needed for continued dialogue and cooperation, especially since this agreement is temporary. This is something that they are continuing to monitor.
Right, so we really have to read in between the lines. Now, like Professor Kim has mentioned, we know that the rollback is conditional, only lasting for 90 days, unless there will be further progress. Mr. Moon, what would you define as meaningful progress in that time? Also, and what are the risks of re-escalation as well?
First of all, I think that this 3-month pause will become permanent. The lesson to be learned from the last 3 months is that a total U.S.-China trade embargo has many downsides and no upsides. So I think that a return to 145% tariffs is neither feasible nor foreseeable. The Geneva meeting was the first U.S.-China engagement on trade issues, and progress achieved included identifying lead negotiators, committing to a formal trade negotiation process, and outlining some of the issues. issues. In the next 90 days, negotiators will identify more clearly issues for discussion. They'll probably create subgroups to facilitate parallel discussions as well. The hardest part will be addressing the industrial policy issues at the heart of the U.S.-China dispute, especially China's non-tariff barriers. Those issues have been disputed for decades and are not likely to be resolved soon.
Right, so it's likely if this talks go through well, then the current status would be maintained. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the joint statement, however, the fentanyl export issue and rare earth supply controls were not really explicitly mentioned. Do you think, should we infer that there were deferred or for future talks, or possibly addressed through, back channels?
We know that these issues were discussed in Geneva, but it's not clear why they were not referenced in the joint statement. The Chinese public security minister attended the talks, and the only possible reason for his presence was to discuss fentanyl. In fact, there was a fentanyl dialogue already underway during the Biden administration. Trump could have continued that process without any need to impose the 20% fentanyl tariffs. As far as I know, fentanyl did not even become a trade issue until about 3 weeks before the 2024 presidential election. Families of fentanyl victims who have suffered greatly and deserve U.S. government support filed a petition at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative seeking Section 301 tariffs against China for insufficient cooperation on fentanyl issues. Now, I'm not sure, but perhaps Trump's emphasis on this issue is a political statement in support of those families, as well perhaps as an effort to gain tariff leverage on China before the beginning of formal talks. What's clear, though, is that we're going to hear a lot more about both fentanyl and critical minerals as the 90-day pause plays itself out.
Right, so we will be able to get more information on that in the coming negotiations. Then, Professor Kim, for regional actors like us, South Korea, what are the strategic implications of this temporary U.S.-China de-escalation? And do you think it gives Seoul some space to maneuver, or does it increase pressure to, take sides in the months ahead?
I think like South Korea, many regional actors and many U.S. allies are, trying to maneuver and navigate the situation. It is difficult to predict with certainty, of course. So, on the one hand, the de-escalation in U.S.-China tensions may reduce the pressure on South Korea to choose between the two powers. That would create more maneuvering space for Seoul and help Seoul navigate the evolving global trade landscape, especially right now. And it not only gives South Korea a window to strengthen its diplomatic position, but it'll also allow Seoul to engage more assertively in regional forums and dialogues as well. So in that sense, it can be a positive aspect. The tariff reductions can also alleviate immediate pressures on exporters and allow Seoul to diversify its trade partnerships beyond the two countries and work with other countries. But also at the same time, it's also possible that President Trump's attention, as it shifts away from China, he may also intensify pressure on U.S. allies instead, including South Korea. So, personally, I find the former scenario a little bit more likely, but given Trump's highly unpredictable leadership style, it's hard to really give a definitive answer. And the temporary nature of the tariff reductions also means that South Korea must prepare for potential re-escalation. I'm hoping not. As Mr. Moon mentioned, I hope that this will not have come back, but still, countries do need to be prepared for what could potentially happen. So this entire tariff war has disrupted economic stability of many countries. And the fact that it's a temporary reduction, at least as of now, indicates that there may be more instability that may occur in the future.
Right, it definitely will deal a big blow, and we'll really have to keep close tabs on that. Now, Professor Kim, then now that we've seen the first phase of this large-scale tariff agreement, do you think this deal could become a model for how the Trump administration intends to manage major bilateral conflicts, short-term concessions for longer leverage?
I think one of the most consistent parts about the Trump administration is that it has been inconsistent. So it's very difficult to say whether or not this could be a pattern or something that we see or a model that continues on. But following the deal, Western outlets like the New York Times and The Economist were quick to point out the limitations of Trump's China policy. In fact, just before negotiations, Trump posted on Truth Social saying 80% tariff on China seems right. But the outcome saw the US reducing tariffs far more significantly than that. So, in that sense, there's already a bit of inconsistency. And in addition to that, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and USTR Representative Jameson Greer both stated that neither side wants decoupling. So, China, for its part, also pledged to further open its markets to the US. But this is a promise that China has been making since the 1990s. So in a sense, when it's faced with rising inflation and falling stock markets, Trump likely agreed to this temporary 90-day deal to buy time and assess whether China would follow through with concrete actions. So given the circumstances, it's hard to really see this as a sustainable model for how the Trump administration intends to manage major bilateral conflicts. And this will also depend on which countries these conflicts may occur with. But it seems just in general right now to be a pressured short-term fix.
Right. So we'll see if this pattern continues. Now, I've been emphasizing this before, but the latest move really looks like a very bold one, slashing tariffs from 145 to 30% in just one stroke. From a trade strategy perspective, Mr. Moon, what's the rationale behind such a deep cut? And do you think it's about restoring market function, sending a message to allies, or creating some leverage for next phase of the talks?
This was an existential decision. Trump had to ask himself whether he wanted U.S.-China trade to continue or not. He created conditions that made bilateral trade unprofitable, and only he could remove the barriers preventing trade from continuing. So he made the right decision to lower tariffs and allow business to proceed. The question I ask myself is, what did Trump gain from the drama he created, and was it worth it? I can't think of a single thing that Trump gained from the tariff war over the past 3 months, but there are plenty of stories of firms that have suffered severe damage. Trump changes course unpredictably and without notice, so there could be additional damage to come. He thinks that unpredictability is an advantage in the deal-making process, but the business community dreads uncertainty. So we know that the story is not over, but we can't necessarily predict what lies ahead.
A lot of damage definitely has been made to the business areas, and we'll have to see. But before we actually conclude our discussion, we are expecting actually a USTR delegation arriving in Seoul by next week. Professor Kim, what should South Korea be preparing for? And do you think this visit could mark the start of a wider effort to enforce trade discipline across allies, or signal a more coordinated approach to the U.S.-China rivalry moving forward?
So Trump is currently facing many domestic economic challenges. This has to do with the falling stock prices as well as rising inflation, among many others. So there is a significant decline in his approval ratings right now. In addition, the ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war that he promised has yet to materialize. So he has few visible achievements to show. And as Mr. Moon mentioned, through this chaos, it's very difficult to figure out what advantages that he has gotten from this. So, in terms of his achievements, whether they're domestic or international, it's very difficult to find many of them. So now he finds himself in a need of a political win, even if it's just for domestic optics. So in this context, trade deals with allied countries could serve as a convenient accomplishment for him. And so, Trump has also recently mentioned the possibility of trade agreements with Japan, South Korea, and India. So in that sense, given the current domestic uncertainties in South Korea, I don't think there's no urgent reason to rush into a deal with the Trump administration. South Korea is already dealing with a lot of internal domestic turmoil. So it would help to have a more prudent approach and to watch how other countries' relationships with the United States evolve and respond accordingly to that.
Right, so observe and wait until we have a fixed administration to deal with the next negotiations. That would be definitely helpful. I'm afraid we'll have to end our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Kim and Mr. Moon. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask